This information is not forthcoming through this terminal at this time.
Okay, thank you. Is every, um, I guess, in time incarnation extension from the oversoul? Sorry, I said that strangely. Every extension from the oversoul that is incarnate, let's say in the same time as you, is that considered a counterpart?
The same time as yourself?
Yes.
That is what we typically refer to as a counterpart, yes.
And so there's no other types of extensions from oversouls that can be incarnate at the same time as you. Like they wouldn't be called anything else, I guess is what I'm asking.
You can make up whatever name you wish, but we typically refer to them as counterparts if they overlap your time frame.
Okay. And you've said previously they can be strangers, enemies, family members, friend, anything, obviously, right?
Yes, absolutely. It depends upon what the oversoul needs to experience by creating that extension in a incarnation.
Yes.
Doesn't have to have necessarily any meaning for you at all, or it could have profound meaning for you. It just depends on what it is that's being investigated by that particular extension, by that
And
particular counterpart.
okay. And if it has profound meaning, then how much of that meaning for us is relevant to the connection to the oversoul? You know, like if something is important to me, if I've connected to a counterpart and that's important to me to express in a neutral and positive way and to have an experience of that nature.
Then it's important for the oversoul to have had that experience where the counterparts interact in that way.
Okay. And where they don't.
Then that's also simply relevant or not relevant for the oversoul.
Relevant or not relevant.
Well, in other words, if they don't interact at all, obviously there is no relevance for them to do so as far as those particular extensions are concerned.
Yes. I'm saying where they interact and the experience is negative.
That can still be very relevant for the oversoul.
And if me as an extension would rather have a neutral or positive experience from what has previously been a negative experience with the counterpart, do I
Then
have that influence?
you find relevance as an individual, and when you find relevance as an individual, then there is relevance for the oversoul as well. It's not excluding anything, it's including everything. So the idea of relevance for the oversoul is also relevance for you as an individual soul.
Okay.
Otherwise, it wouldn't happen to you. It would be relevant for some other extension. But if it happens to you, it's not only relevant for the oversoul, but it's relevant for your individual experience as well. Otherwise, it would happen to another extension.
And then naturally, if it persists in being relevant to me in terms of my like core signature or my nature, then it would just naturally or sustainably persist of its own accord, me being myself, them being themselves.
Yes, unless you change your mind about whether or not you wish it to continue.
It's my choice.
It is your choice. That doesn't necessarily mean that you haven't set it up as something that you really do need to do. I'm just saying you always have the option to discount it or dismiss it. That doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't pay attention to it. I'm just saying you always have the option. Then whatever the result of that particular choice is, will be something that you will also experience that will be relevant for you.
I see. Well, I would like to share in, closing more or less that what I've learned from this counterpart, loving them and learning what love is with them through what has been a spectrum of polarity, but negative, neutral, and positive, is that I used to think that unconditional love was determined by how much you love. But what I learned from and with this person is that unconditional love is more determined by the conditions. Because if the love can't survive the conditions, then it isn't unconditional.
Yes, the idea of unconditional love is simply the frequency of existence itself, and sometimes has very little to do with human expressions that are recognized or called love. So the idea is to understand that it's a state of being that is pure unto itself, that allows for a compassionate relationship to exist in an observational way, regardless of what the actual human interactions have to do with. So it's kind of on two different levels. You can have the unconditional love, which is the pure state of being of compassion and recognition and allowance, while at the same time allowing yourself to recognize that you may have set yourself up for certain conditions and terms and experiences that are not necessarily always expressed through unconditional love, but could be.
Okay. And ultimately presented with this so that you decide what you prefer.
Yes.
Got it. The game is endless.
Yes.
That made me
Absolutely.
tear up. So thank you, Bashar.
You are welcome. Thank you, Aveo.
Ave.
What's up, Bashar? Thanks for this opportunity. I wanted to ask you that are different brainwave frequencies, different sub-egos, like are different brainwave frequencies, could they be considered as the physical manifestation of thoughts? And the collection of different certain frequency, like area, such as alpha waves, could they be considered a sub-ego, like a mind within a mind, a collection of thoughts, a thought process? Thank you very much.
Yes, to all of it, if you wish to look at it that way, and if those definitions help bring you clarity. The vibration and the different states of being in the brain are the result not just of the idea of thoughts, but of the idea of belief systems, because it is belief systems that actually generates the physical personality, which then has the thoughts that go with those particular frequencies. But I know that sometimes on your planet, people interchangeably use the idea of thoughts and beliefs. But it is really fundamentally what you really believe to be true that generates the frequency state that you're in. And sometimes what you know to be true, which is beyond belief, which generates those frequencies, which then generates the thoughts that are germane and relevant for those particular frequency states.
Hello, Bashar. How are you today?
Perfect. And you?
Thank you. It's an honor to talk to you.
It is an honor to talk with you as well. What would you like to discuss?
There's a few things I would like to discuss, but I guess the main thing would be to ask you about something that happened when I was a child. Almost
Yes.
this stems from when I was a child. I grew up in Los Angeles, and sometimes on the weekends we would go to Mexico, a place called Tecate. We would go there for the weekend, and one night, Sunday night, when we were gonna come back, I my parents would have basically us pack the stuff up and take it to the car. I looked at night at the sky, and basically I saw a UFO there. Um, to me as a kid, when I looked at the sky, it looked almost, my imagination was like almost like if somebody put a sticker on the sky, which was a wall, but it was slanted and it had color lights around it, different color lights. Then I guess society took over in my mind, and a thought was like, what if I get abducted? What if I never see my parents again? And I ran into the house. Being a child, I wasn't sure what to do. Now, with the perspective time gives me, I'm wondering, was that an alien reproduction vehicle, human, or was that ET extra dimensional?
ET extra dimensional.
It was.
Absolutely. You are part of the hybridization agenda.
Thank you. Is there a connection between, well, there must be, but I just want to see, between ancient Mexico, ETs, and contemporary current Mexico, since there seems to be a
Oh,
lot of activity?
absolutely. There is a lot of activity in that area on your planet. There are strong connections in the past and the present between humans and extraterrestrials and extra dimensionals in that area. Absolutely. Ongoing, has been going on for quite some time.
Okay. And this has something to do with me being a kid and witnessing that then?
Well, you're part of it as well. You agreed to be part of it. You agreed to be immersed in that energy. You agreed to participate in the idea of contact and hybridization and so on and so forth. All the things that are part of the evolution of humanity on the earth.
And that's why since a kid, I've been very strongly basically attracted to that. Basically, that seeing the UFO, and another thing would be ancient Mexico. You spoke about, or you mentioned Gukumat, Getacoat in some of your transmissions,
Yes.
tied to the crystal skulls.
Yes.
But there's so much information out there that sometimes I don't know. I mean, what is what?
The
For
information
example,
you require will come to you automatically and synchronistically that's relevant for you. Whatever is not relevant doesn't need to come. You will receive the information that's relevant for you to help you move forward. It just happens automatically when you follow the formula. That's why we share it with all of you. It makes it easy.
yes, definitely. And well, I first want to throw in there to thank you so much for the information you put out, the vibration you give out, just for being yourself and giving that example, being that reflection.
We can be nothing else, but we thank you.
Thank you. I had a question about basically a couple of scholars that I've read about. They both are tied into work in Mexico. Very controversial, both of them, but the stuff that they talk about has a lot of parallels to pretty much things that you do. Um, so one of them is Carlos Castaneda. I was wondering if you could give me your perspective on that whole part of basically ancient sorcerers, seers, the whole thing about the Tonal
Yes,
and the Nahual.
it is a
Almost like,
journey of shamanism, an experience of the idea of your connection not only to nature, but as nature, an expression of nature, and a connection to the earth and the earth consciousness. So it's a journey of shamanism that functions as a representation, as a symbol, as a sample of the journeys that many of you can take if you are willing to connect to nature spirits.
we're going to connect to nature spirits. Would water, bodies of water, rivers, lakes, oceans, is that a strong connection with energy, with nature that
I think
that
you
I
know the
can
answer to
follow?
that. I think you know the answer to that.
Thank you. Lastly, well, the going back to the Carlos Castaneda thing, he was a scholar that studied in Mexico. He referenced somebody else who was also a scholar who also studied in Mexico. Somebody who, like him, is no longer here. We don't know don't really know what happened according to different stories. But this person, his name is Jacobo Greenberg Seilerbaum, and he ended up working with a medium, an open channel, who would channel in the spirit of Cuauhtemoc, the last Aztec emperor. He would do psychic surgeries through the body of Bachita, which was a famous shaman back in the 60s, 70s, around that time. In um, one of the paragraphs in the book that Jacobo wrote, it was Cuauhtemoc's birthday, and they made pretty much like a festival for him in the place where he would do psychic surgeries on people. I guess the procedure was kind of opening up to questions to the people who were there, and then they would proceed to operate using a blunt knife, and they would take out hearts or take out organs and put them
Is
back
there a
in.
question here?
Yes, there is. Basically, he would ask them, the person that was right there working with him, he would ask Pachita in the presence of El Hermanito, which was Cuauhtemoc, the last Aztec emperor. And he told him that he was reading about his life. And then he pretty much replied that he had told them that they wouldn't do human sacrifices, that he was witnessing what they would do, which would be psychic surgeries. I was wondering if you could give some feedback on that.
You must understand that it is important to know that all healing takes place in the belief system of the person requiring the healing. The idea is whatever makes sense culturally, symbolically, whatever is representative of connecting to your higher mind, Whatever is understood in physical reality to be an illusion can still have great power as a symbol to allow people to change their frequency and change the physicality of their bodies in ways that may seem miraculous, but really are just an indication that physical reality is just a projection of consciousness. So the techniques and the approach of those rituals that you're talking about were simply ways of hearkening back to certain kinds of ideas. We can't go into that story deeply, it would take too long. But the idea of doing the psychic surgery as a representation of the so-called past sacrifices that were done as a misunderstanding of a connection to extraterrestrial beings can be used as a symbol of the idea that physical reality is changeable, malleable, and it requires the belief system of the person to open themselves up, to allow themselves to change themselves with the permission that comes from relating to the cultural ritual that is undertaken by the shaman or the healer. Does that make sense? Do you understand what we have said?
To a certain point, but I was wondering if you could just clarify it a little bit more.
All healing is done by the person who requires the healing. The shaman or the healer simply sets up the vibration, and in this case uses an ancient ritual or represents or symbolizes an ancient ritual to express the power that is innate in every individual to heal themselves. Does this make more sense?
Yes, it definitely does. So kind of like with a lot of places, they say the healer is just a reflection, basically a conduit that lets the spirit come through them, and basically the person who's receiving this will get whatever they need to get out of that, correct?
Based on their belief system and willingness to match the frequency of the vibration of the healer or the shaman, yes.
Mm-hmm. In that particular case as well, this other, I guess he was a seer, Don Juan Matus, he explained that the person's technique as well was to remove doubt from the minds of everybody who was present there, because there was quite a bit of people witnessing these operations. And he described it as basically the spirit taking over and moving people's assemblage point. It was some kind of energetic configuration that they would see.
Yes, we understand. Again, people attracted to that idea are willing to let go of certain limiting belief systems, moving their so-called connection or assemblage or agreement point to the point where they understand that more is possible in physical reality, because physical reality is nothing more than a projection of their consciousness. So it's a ritual that allowed for a collective agreement to shift to a new understanding, making other things possible in their physical experience.
So is this what happened when they say that under the guidance of some ancient seers, entire cities in what today is Mexico and Central America pretty much moved their consciousness over to a different world?
Yes, shifting to another reality en masse. You're shifting all the time. You're shifting billions of times a second. But when a collective agreement goes along and harmonizes in their frequency to shift together as one culture, as one collective, then yes, they can shift themselves strongly to another reality where they may seem to completely, utterly disappear from the reality they used to be in.
And they enter into a totally separate reality, another realm.
Another time stream, yes.
And is that what we're doing right now with this time of change?
To some degree, yes, you are.
Lydian prism that you were mentioning
Yes,
to me?
yes, it's all connected.
It seems like that.
You will wind up on a different Earth and eventually no longer experience those that are not of the compatible vibration of the reality that you have shifted to.
And like you mentioned, we do this billions of times already, but it looks like the collective guides us to a certain place.
Your choices guide you to a certain place based on the frequency that your choice results in. There will be those that will join you in a similar kind of reality, but there will be those that won't.
Hello Bashar, this is Christian from Germany, and I have a question concerning your relationship to the all that is. I would like to know if you have any acts or any expressions of your relationship. So do you have ceremonies or celebrations, or do you have any symbols or acts of gratitude, or how do you express and live your relationship to the all that is? Thank you.
Again, we allow ourselves to be our true selves, true representations of the individual expressions of all that is that we are. That is how we honor the idea of all that is, by being the most true reflection of the individual uniqueness that each of us expresses, which then creates total harmony in our civilization. An ancient word that expresses our connection to all that is Shakana, the highest exalted light, living light, because everything is made of living light. So Shakana is the highest exalted light that represents the collection of all that is and all the unique individual expressions and reflections of it. We can create spontaneous celebrations on an individual or collective level, but we simply allow those to happen synchronistically, since we operate on pure synchronism in our society. Everything comes together exactly in perfect timing when it needs to express whatever it is excited or passionate to express. And sometimes that may look like a celebration of certain things, but it happens automatically. Nothing is planned.
Hi,
Good
Bashar.
day. Good day. Good day.
How are you?
Perfect. And you?
I am well, thank you.
All right. What would you like to discuss this day?
Well, on Saturday, March 4th in our time, the patriarch of my father's family line, his eldest brother, transitioned.
Yes.
And the next day was my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And happy transition day.
Yes, to him as well. He lived a grand, important, very decided life.
Physical life, because he is still alive.
Yes.
All right.
Incarnation. He lived a very bold incarnation.
All right.
Just wondering if there was some message in him deciding to transition the day before I decided to be born.
Well, again, it's a reminder that transition is a different kind of birth, a rebirth back into the idea of your natural state. And anyone that transitions, especially so close to the idea of another date that represents the idea of the starting of a journey, reminds you that you can now uplift and raise your vibration, connect more strongly through him to spirit, reaching out to him, reconnecting in a different way now to start a different level, a new birthday for you, a new level of connection, a new level of understanding and experience in your physical life. So whatever it is you learned from that individual, carry forth, be bold, live your life in a grand way, if that is what is represented by this individual to you, but on a new level, a new scale, a new vibrational frequency that will carry you forward with more momentum toward your understanding and expression of your spiritual nature in physical terms.
Okay.
You understand?
Okay. Yes.
All right.
I appreciate that description. Because actually I've been noticing more signs of the multidimensionality, in the sense that I've gone to places and had conversations with people about things that they remember fundamentally differently. Like an easy example is I went to a timeshare in San Francisco that I go to often, where I've always entered through a certain door. And this time I was confused when I went because that door wasn't open. And so I went into a different door. I'm realizing I'm saying doors now a lot. As when I was speaking to the concierge, I told him I didn't recognize the place at first because I had always entered through the other door. And he made a funny joke alluding that I must have been on LSD because that other door was never open for that purpose.
There you go. And of course, there is no accident in that this is called a time share.
Haha. I never thought about that.
Oh, now you can.
Thank you. Speaking of time,
Yes.
I'm going to say this in my own language, but you once said that pi is the numerical representation of different dimensions and how they're constantly shifting.
Yes.
And so what is the fine structure constant? What's the numerical representation? What's that the numerical representation of?
One moment.